Miles, welcome to Team Teatime chat. You did a number of time teams, and you're based at Bournemouth, where I understand you're in charge of archaeological field work, which must be amazing. I think that must be a fantastic job. On Time Team, we did an Iron Age site down here in Cornwall at Gear Farm, and I think we found 17, 18 roundhouses. You've just done an Iron Age site, and you found 300 iron houses. Do you have a very large warehouse for your finds? How do you deal with all that?
Well, we've got our own archaeological stores, but yeah, it's a very big problem. So much coming in, and as we go towards the Roman period, people seem to be getting more and more wasteful. You know, so much is being thrown away. So we're getting lots of pottery. Every pit that we dig seems to have got animal remains in it as well. So skeletal material, let alone the pottery that's coming back, is just crates and crates of it. So we're almost full. I think now, but it's I think if you were digging an Iron Age site sort of in northern Britain, it's less finds, you know, dense, so actually that's quite a good thing. But yeah, the quantity of material coming up, it's quite terrifying at times.
How did you find the time? What are your memories of the Time Team experience? You know, how did you find that 3-day concentration? And were there some sites where you felt, yes, we did manage to achieve something? How do you think that as a model of doing archaeology work? Because on your current project, you're doing a season every summer, which is, what's that, 6 weeks now?
Yes, yeah, it's about 6 weeks every year for about the last 10. So a bit different.
So how did you find 3 days of it?
It really helped focus the mind. It was brilliant. I mean, what I love is, you know, when Time Team first started, I was just beginning lecturing here at Bournemouth and teaching archaeology. And most of the students, their first introduction to archaeology was things like Chronicle and various other different programs. And it was leisurely research, dig, great finds. And trying to tell them archaeology is not like that. You know, you'll be dropped into a site, you'll have a short amount of time, limited resources. You've got to try and do geophysical survey. And then Time Team started, and it was brilliant. Just watch that. That is your ideal introduction to field archaeology. You know, with the vagaries of the weather, with people arguing, people sort of debating what to do next, the strategy changing with every new discovery. So, you know, Time Team came at a fantastic point of, I think, for me and for training archaeologists in general. I hadn't realised, I mean, my first one I think I did for you was the site at Ipswich, and that was very much sort of landing in the middle of it. It was a brilliant Time Team because it was a classic one in that you're digging up people's gardens, and I think that's it. That personal contact and level is what Time Team did best. But having 8 or 10 gardens, I think was a bit, you know, I remember lots of running, lots of staring down empty holes, and we had the problem that Basil Brown, who had found the villa in the first place, trying to fit his plan onto where those gardens were. I think it was looking back on it, I think actually the thing I regret most of all is actually relying, this is going to sound terrible, relying on geophysics. Because much as I loved it, and we use geophysics all the time, in people's gardens, you had drains, you had dead pets, you had remains of swings, all the kind of things that were just, you couldn't really see the archaeology. And if I did that again, I would actually spend the first day just talking to every single person. What have you found in your garden? Because it wasn't until we spoke to one family who said, oh, we found a bit of a wall near a fence. And I think it was Danny dug a test bit there, and he found the one bit of wall that we could lock our entire plan onto. So that was about 3 o'clock on the last day. So it was yeah, I mean, that was an interesting one to start with, I think, but it was good fun.
We then took you up to sample the Scottish midges on Loch Migdale. And
Absolutely.
You got any memories of that?
Apart from the midges and the Scotch, I love that site, Loch Migdale. I mean, it wasn't involved in the loch itself, which I think you got Phil out in the water there, which was no doubt was good for him. No, actually, on the actual henge that we were digging, that nice little prehistoric enclosure, I think that was, of all the sites I probably worked on, all the sites I've worked on in my life, I think that's one of my favourite, because it's a nice contained ritual monument from the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age. It's looking out towards the loch. In that last day we were there, we excavated the entrance area, and there was a standing stone lying on its side. And I think, as I recall, having cleaned it up, someone asked me, could we stand it upright? And without thinking, I sort of picked it up and stood it upright, and then sort of staggered out a shot with my back because I hurt myself in doing it. But that was a fantastic site. I mean, its landscape was beautiful there, and it almost made up for the midges.
I remember Loch Migdale as well was one of the occasions when various members of the production team decided to play one of the inevitable tricks on us. We'd had a guy weave very carefully withy nets, withy containers to catch eels and things. And when I don't know if you were involved in this, but on the final day when we went to collect the eels, we hope collect the eels, bring these things up from the bottom of the water, there was a large selection of cans of fish somebody had put in them. So we knew that various characters, probably Kerry or someone, had been involved. But yes,
it sounds like Kerry. Yeah.
Yes, it was a memorable sight. One of the things we asked people, Miles, is that if people are saying, let's get Time Team together again, let's get the geophysics on the road, let's start looking for sites. And we asked, quite a lot of people, if you had a time team, your own package of people that you wanted, your own technologies, and you were going to go to a site, which site, maybe a particular site or a site that might solve a problem for you? Have you got a fantasy time team site?
Oh God, I've got too many. I mean, I'm sort of work primarily in prehistory and Roman, so that's the period which I really want to get resolved better. Certainly in Roman archaeology, everything's focused on towns and villas, and the countryside is often neglected. So, I mean, I know you had this issue with trying to locate Roman temples. For me, Roman temples are the most interesting part of the period because they're often built directly on Iron Age predecessors. So you see a continuity of religious activity from prehistory to the Roman period and sometimes beyond. So any kind of rural temple, anywhere where you've got a real sense of people's connection with the gods and connection with the afterlife, that for me is the ideal type of site.
And have you got some secret locations that you might be able to lead us to that are at the source of a river or a particular rich?
Yes, absolutely. There are quite a large number on my wish list.
We shall talk more. And do you have an Iron Age hero, British hero character? I mean, is it? My pronunciation is going to be all over the place, but Cynobelin?
Cynobelin in Essex. My sort of, I suppose if you're going to ask for an Iron Age hero, it would be his son Caraticus. Because Caraticus, when we see in the 1st century, he's on Rome's side. Then when the Romans arrive, he decides that he's going to resist them, and he fights a guerrilla campaign in the southeast. Then he disappears. He re-emerges in South Wales, causing problems there. He re-emerges in North Wales. And the Romans are basically chasing after him. They sort of view him as the real problem. There's a sort of sense of, once we've captured him, the war's over. So they go their best to try and take control. And when they do finally capture him and take him to Rome in chains, we're told the Emperor Claudius sort of forgives him, lets him free, and he lives out his life in luxury in Rome. So whereas the story of Boudica is one really of sort of revolt and death on an immense scale and tragedy, Caractacus is a little more, not say jolly, but it's a far more emotive story. He's one of those sort of forgotten characters, I think, of that period.
He sounds, he sounds absolutely great as, following through the different relationships of Rome. We know about him presumably through Julius Caesar's Gaul or Roman writings.
We know about Caractacus primarily, yes, from the writings of Tacitus and Dio Cassius, who are our two standard sources for that. I mean, they're writing quite a bit after the time, but he's still remembered at that stage as sort of a model of the heroic barbarian.
And I noticed, I think you've had a certain amount of occasional forays into the Arthur territory. An individual who is somehow between the Romans and the Saxons, as it were. What are your up-to-date thoughts on that role and the likelihood of a person who played that kind of role?
Yeah, I mean, the Arthur story is one of endless fascination. Of course, it always has been and probably always will. And I don't think we're ever going to get to the real sort of truth of the matter. But when we have been studying a lot of the early texts relating to Arthur, and certainly it's Geoffrey of Monmouth, who in the 1130s AD is the first writer to give us the whole life story of Arthur from birth to death. And his account is just filled with a whole series of different stories. He sort of combines a whole series of characters, of which Caractacus is actually one, and creates an Arthur out of pushing all these individuals. He really sort of creates an heroic figure, which the British need in their war against the Saxons. So it's trying to get to the truth and disentangle all these various different bits of fiction and all these different tales. And really, when it comes down to it, Arthur's about 5 separate people who Geoffrey of Monmouth has pushed into the one.
Because the rather limited knowledge I have of references to Arthur goes back to 12th, 13th century Welsh writing, I think, where he makes an appearance. And like you say, maybe it's an assemblage of the idea of this person being put together in a sense because we needed him.
Absolutely. And because it's fascinating, there has to have been a character somewhere in that post-Roman period where all these tales could be stuck onto, and it's trying to find out what's going on from the very limited sources. It's a very interesting period to be involved with.
And your Iron Age hero Caractacus, was there a specific battle? What was the point at which he effectively lost and realized that Roman legions were going to be rather hard work to defeat? Or
I mean, he did have a very good campaign against them, realizing that it's you never fight them in a pitched battle if you can avoid it. It's a guerrilla campaign. It's wearing them down. It's fighting them in the mountains. And there is a battle which annoyingly the Roman writers don't give us a name for, somewhere in North Wales, where he realizes the game is up and he retreats and he tries to go north to Cartimandua. She's the queen in sort of Yorkshire, what is now Yorkshire. And she realizes that where Caractacus is about, the Romans will follow, and she hands him straight over to the Romans and sort of does herself a good deal in the process. So it's more he's betrayed by treachery, I guess, and that sort of sense of every tribe is in it for themselves. Some realise the Romans are good and some fight against them. And I think at that stage, most of them are starting to realise you can't fight Rome if you want to survive. The best thing is to try and deal with them as best you can.
Whenever you think about fighting Rome, I always think of the poor individual at Maiden Castle with the ballista bolt stuck in his spine. And I would suggest that would be a bit off-putting facing the Romans.
Absolutely. I mean, the Romans have got fighting down to a T. They've got the first professional fighting force in the ancient world. They've got soldiers who trained for 25 years. They are just heavily armoured psychopaths. They do what you can't stand up to them in those kind of terms.
I think somewhere, Miles, in you, there's a TV series featuring Caractacus, possibly played by Clive Owen or, whoever we've got.
Sounds good. Sign me up.
Finding his way through to and disappearing in Wales, and then ending up in Rome, living a rather. I think he sold out a bit at the end.
I think he realised that there was fairly pointless fighting, and that, you know, if someone was offering a life in central Italy with nice food and hypercourse, then, you know, take it.
And I think people think, you know, it must be, are we, you know, we're like the poor cousins of the Roman world. We're on the edge of the empire. And wouldn't you like to be in Middle Europe, somewhere around Lyon? Or I was looking at a site at Grand, where they had a 17,000-seater amphitheatre. What is the attraction of working with Roman sites on the edge of the empire like this, or are we on the edge of the empire?
Oh, we are, absolutely. I mean, I agree. Certainly, the weather and the food and wine's better somewhere in the south of France. But I think, I mean, the archaeology is really fascinating. It's trying to see why, you know, what is Rome trying to get out of Britain, and what's in it for the Britons. And although we tend to get a bit sort of overawed by things like Fishbourne Roman Palace or some, you know, other villas, it's a very small minority of the population, probably less than 1% of the people are living like that. And it's more interesting to see how, you know, how are other people living, how are they interacting with Rome, how is Roman culture, when you look at a lot of the art, the sculpture and the mosaics that are being made in Roman Britain. If you're a classical art scholar, you look at those and think that, you know, an 8-year-old child could draw better than that. But it's fascinating to see that these sort of art is acceptable. It's like the British mindset and Roman ideas fused together to create something wholly distinctive and unusual. And I love that, because you can go around most of the museums in Europe and you can see, here's another Greek sculpture, here's another one, here's another Roman, and they're beautiful works of art, but they're all perfect. And it's the imperfections of Romano British archaeology, I think, which is just amazing. Just, you know, trying to understand what was actually going on in people's minds.
And we've been talking recently to authors who combine historical research with a sort of creative response to people. They peopling the past is what they do. Do you have are there any authors that sit in that area where you're comfortable with the research, comfortable with the detail, and can enjoy the characters? Is it Simon Scarrow is one?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm always actually a fan of Lindsay Davis with all the sort of the Falco stories. They are amazing. Very much sort of like a 1930s detective set in Imperial Rome, and the archaeological detail that she brings into that, it never suffocates the story. It's, you know, the characters are in there, and they're doing what I love about it is a lot of people, when they write about the past, create really artificial characters. They seem very distant and unusual, and speaking very grand tones. She fills them with people, with characters that we recognise today. And I think she's a fantastic writer, and, you know, long may she continue.
Well, we hopefully be able to get in touch with her and have a chat with her, because it's certainly, in the discussions we've been having, it's felt like almost if we were, you know, doing another time team somewhere, we'd almost have an author as a kind of informal bard who'd be along telling the story, and she sounds great.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. Actually, trying to communicate that to I think you write a storyteller, a bard, someone like that to actually get that message. Because archaeologists, we're often very bad at communicating real stories. We're great at saying this piece of pottery dates from and this coin is, but actually that bringing the past to life. If you could have someone like that on board, I think that would be amazing.
And were you are you of the generation that as a child you possibly read Rosemary Sutcliffe's, what was it, Eagle of the Ninth?
Eagle of the Ninth, yes, and the Lantern Bearers and all the, she was an absolutely amazing author. I think the Eagle of the Ninth is probably my most read book as a child. It's probably what got me into archaeology in the first place.